right, everybody. Welcome back to the Light and Life podcast. I'm your host today, Parker Samuelson. Glad to have you here for this conversation on faith and life from downtown Colorado Springs. I'm here with lead pastor here, Tim McConnell.
Parker, it's good to have you doing this this time around.
Yeah.
And thanks for jumping in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know some listeners will be disappointed our friend Liza's not here. She's a good friend, but we're excited to have a conversation today about gratitude, more specifically giving thanks in hard times.
Yeah, right.
So I want to hear your experience with this. I mean, you've been a pastor for many years, and I want to just hear overall kind of your perspective on what gratitude looks like biblically and how it can be a core aspect of our spiritual walk.
Great. Yeah. I thought this would be a good thing to talk about. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving this week, and
that's right.
So people are sort of gathered around this idea of giving thanks, of gathering around. By the way, if you're watching the YouTube video, I'm giving thanks that I'm going through a dermatology treatment, and you can tell that I'm getting some anything that's precancerous is getting burned off of my face through radioactive material that I'm wiping on myself daily. So that's a pretty fun thing.
Right.
And but I am grateful for.
Hey, praise God for modern medicine.
Modern medicine.
Yeah, there we go.
And,
thanks in hard times.
Yeah, hopefully, I won't have that chunk taken out of my face later on of some terrible thing.
Yeah.
But gratitude is, I think about the Psalms a lot, Parker. Like, there's the Psalms will command us to give thanks to the Lord, give thanks. It's kind of
right.
it bounces in there, but it's not just. Sometimes we say, I give thanks to the Lord for all of His good blessings. Like I'm going to look back and I'm going to see that there have been wonderful blessings. And so, yes, there's a discipline of giving thanks that we can talk about. That, like, if you don't give thanks for the good things, but also there's just the command to live gratefully and to give thanks even when things are hard, which was kind of what I thought we would talk about today. Right.
Well, two words that you said that I really loved there. One is the discipline of gratitude.
Yeah.
I think that's important because so many of these spiritual practices there's an element of it that they are a discipline. And it's something that you kind of have to be a little intentional about. And then the other word, command, too. I mean, some of these things do rise to the level where God tells us, it's like, no, I'm explicitly telling you in the scripture that I think this is what's best for you. And one thought on that, just a note I wrote down when I was looking into this, you could almost make the joke that gratitude is kind of this miracle drug, because even just on a personal level, I mean, I always have had the opinion that when God tells us to do things, often it's not because He's just this mean, cruel teacher, but instead He wants what's best for us. So why does He want us to experience a life of gratitude? Well, what does gratitude do with the benefits of modern science? We can test these things. Improved mental health, strengthened relationships, better sleep. I mean, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Increased resilience, self-esteem, your immune system. I mean, there's all of these things where it's a trickle-down effect through your whole physiology even. And I wrote down here, I mean, there's no side effects, and it's free, right? And my last comment on that is...
Yeah, so somebody could sell it as a miracle drug, right? Like you could do, instead of like a balance of nature, you could have like I've packed in 16 different nutrients of gratitude. Yeah,
yes.
and I mean, we should sell it. I think we should...
Right now, this is an infomercial. Buy one, get one free.
We have a miracle drug.
Right.
Better sleep.
Yeah.
Better mental health.
Promotes neuroplasticity, longevity. I mean, that's cool. And my last comment I was going to say on that is similar to forgiveness. I've heard that. So there's somebody that I've appreciated following on different podcasts, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about this, but you can pick this stuff up on fMRI studies where with forgiveness and gratitude, it actually rewires your brain.
There's a literal,
how cool is that?
Change to the wiring, the it's amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
How God has made us.
Yeah. So I know we had talked earlier about a book that you had referenced, 1,000 Gifts by Ann Voskamp. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned two words, Parker, that stood out to me there. Discipline. And I forgot the other one.
Command.
Command.
Yeah.
But for discipline, That's right. Discipline and command. That is exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So discipline. What's a discipline? A discipline is when you kind of you force yourself to do something that you can do.
Right.
To strengthen your position.
Right.
So that you can do more later. So
right.
You want to live a life of gratitude, but you're not very good at it. Spiritual disciplines are like learning how to run towards a marathon. You're not going to just get up the next day and say, "Well, I'm going to run a marathon."
Right.
Tomorrow I'm going to be a super. Maybe you've been a really cynical, hardened.
Right.
You've carried a lot of resentment, a lot of grudges.
Right.
You have not practiced a lot of gratitude, and you say, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to be a super grateful person."
Right.
To get all these benefits.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get there without the discipline of doing a little bit, like a discipline of training for a marathon where you're going to run a mile, run 2 miles, run 5 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way, what can you do to exercise your gratitude muscles? And but the other word that you used was command, and when I talk about that, as you said, God's commands are for our good.
Right.
I always try to reiterate God's word, God's commands, God's teaching are for His glory and for your good.
Yeah, right.
And it's amazing that those fit together because it didn't have to be that way. God could need something, could require us to glorify Him and not reflect anything good to our physiology or to our relationships or to our sleep cycles.
Right.
It's just God just requires it. Mm-hmm. But God's commands are always for His glory and for your good, and it's just incredible that's that way. So, years ago, I want to say about 12 years ago, I read a book by Ann Voskamp, and she's now a very famous writer, but she broke out with this book called 1,000 Gifts. Have you ever read that?
No, I haven't.
So this is what she did. She did a gratitude exercise. So she recognized in her own life, I'm not a very grateful person. And I see this, and she knew the Lord's, and I see this in scriptures that God wants me to live with more gratitude. Right. And so what am I going to do to change that? So the discipline that she decided to do was start a journal listing 1,000 blessings for which she could give thanks to God. And she tried to write down a bunch a day. I can't remember exactly how many she would write down. But so she'd just walk through her life and say, well, I've got to come up with a solid amount.
Right.
So what does that force you to do? Well, you're not just waiting for these big grand moments where where the heavens have opened and the sun is shining, and no, you've got to start paying attention to the little things.
Right. Like that.
So she's like walking, she cooks she lives a very farmhouse kind of lifestyle, which is also her brand, like her shtick. Right. And what do you call that? Like farm. Well,
it's
not quite tradwife.
I was thinking tradwife. That's what I was thinking. That seems kind of like the new TikTok, Instagram trend. Which is funny. I mean, calling it a trend, it's really not, because it's really kind of going back to our roots as who we are, is a more traditional form of life tied in with nature and things like that. But that is kind of what I thought about.
She lives with her husband and their kids on a farm, and he's a farmer. They're involved in their local church in a small town. But anyway, so she's like, well, it's not. I'm not going to get there with just like the big things, like thank you for my marriage, thank you for. So she had to start focusing on smaller things. Yeah. So you walk outside and you see the sunrise, and you pause to write down, Lord, thank you for the beauty of that sunrise. That's cool. You walk into the kitchen and you smell, the coffee brewing. Right. And you need to write down, Lord, thank you for the smell of coffee. I really love that. Or a flower, or a little smile from your child. And so she'd write all these things down. So she got down to, I think she got down to 1,000, and then she realized that she just wanted to keep going. And so she wrote a book called 1,000 Gifts, and encouraged people to start this process of growing in gratitude. But that's kind of, frankly, Parker, like for me, that's sugary and sweet.
Yeah. Right.
That's like flowery and potpourri kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But what really got me was learning her story. Because Ann Voskamp actually struggles with really deep mental health challenges. And so she's overcoming a major challenge to stay in a positive and joyful space day to day. And a big part of that was a childhood trauma. When she was growing up on a farm and her little sister ran out in front of a delivery truck right in the driveway of their farmhouse.
Wow.
And Anne watched that happen
Yeah.
as a, I think, 6 or 7 year old little girl. And she watched her sister die.
Wow.
And then she watched her parents as she grew up not handling the grief well.
Wow.
And descending into their own pain and their own inability to move on and navigate life past that grief and that trauma.
Yeah.
And so here's the point: is that for me it meant a lot that it wasn't just I'd like to add more flowery aroma to my life through gratitude.
Right.
She realizes this is a battle. And I'm either going to go down the dark road or I'm going to find a way to come up out of the ditch and stand in the sun.
Wow.
And so to write down, I'm grateful for the smell of these biscuits.
Yeah.
And the thing that she found was, as you've already referenced, it started to change her life.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a very meaningful story that creates a backdrop to that, to her practice. Again, the discipline that she's doing there. Again, this isn't just cute, flowery. It's not some life coaching thing. This is a deeply transformational decision to go through this process. And one thing I was thinking of is I heard a woman speak at a conference once, and she has a book. I'm not going to get the exact name of it right, but it's something along the lines of everything happens for a reason and other lies I've learned, or something like that, because she had a cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
And everybody was trying to help her grieve, but kind of doing it in the wrong way, kind of like Job's friends, right? Where they're like, oh, it can't be that bad. There's probably other things that have happened that are worse, or things like that, where it was really minimizing for this pain and trauma that she was experiencing, kind of like the Ann Voskamp with her childhood trauma that she experienced. And my wife is a mental health counselor, and she's helped me. I felt very convicted when she would say some of these techniques that she uses to help people grieve, because I was like, I've been doing it wrong my whole life. Because one example is I would try to share a personal story to kind of commiserate. And it's like, don't do that. It's because then you're making it about you. You have to authenticate this person's experience that it's hard. And so I think of for the author, Ann Voskamp, experiencing that as a child, it's wow. I mean, for people that have experienced deep trauma like that in their life, I would struggle to say, oh, just do a gratitude journal and I'll be better. But instead, it's saying like, okay, let's recognize how hard this is. Yeah. But if you can come out on top of that and find a way to live a life of gratitude, I mean, you're almost kind of taking agency and winning that battle, which is cool. And it's I feel like there's even a spiritual dimension to that too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a command of God. So there's a spiritual dimension to it. It's whenever God is issuing a command, whenever He's speaking to us, we either obey or disobey. And so, and if we disobey, we invite all kinds of frankly, of evil into our lives and of destruction, self-destruction, destructive forces of the spiritual realm. Right. And so, for her, it's very much a spiritual battle. I think gratitude is a spiritual battle. But there was so also reading that book and learning her story, she really centered her thought around a particular verse in Habakkuk. And so I wanted to read that for us and talk about that just a little bit. Please. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, So this is Habakkuk 3:17 and 18. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord.
Wow.
I will be joyful in God my Savior. So for her, that was a conviction of saying, I'm not going to practice gratitude. I'm not going to wait for the right kinds of environments that make me grateful.
Right.
This is though, the fig tree, all these are pastoral images of like if we live on a farm or something.
Right.
She actually did grow up on a farm and lives on a farm, but she would talk about the fig tree of her marriage, or the olive crop of raising her kids and wanting her kids to, to live a certain life or to be thriving in a certain way. And she says, though that doesn't come in. I mean, everything that I've put into it, everything that I've invested, everything that I've planted and nourished and cultivated, and it doesn't come in.
Yeah.
Yet I will choose to rejoice in the Lord.
Yeah.
There's agency, like you were saying.
Right. That's cool. And I think about even Jesus, hundreds of years after Habakkuk, he's making so many agricultural metaphors, and we're so disconnected from that in our lives that it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for us. But I mean, I think about what you were saying, how for these people in an agricultural society, these were all of their assets. So it's like, okay, my grapes on the vine, I'm like, who cares about the grapes on the vine? But like, no, that's my retirement. That's my life insurance. That's my health insurance. That's my income. That's everything. So it's like when Habakkuk is saying all these things, he says, look, even if I have nothing, and which is hard for me to imagine, it's like, what if everything that I have, kind of like a Job situation, and even extending it into relationships. And so I kind of try to go back to that. What if all of those things were stripped away from me? Would I still have my same foundation in the Lord? Would I still have my same posture of gratitude?
Yeah.
And that's where it gets real because I mean, we've talked a lot about, I really appreciate our vision as a church, Light and Life for the City, but I've heard people say for other organizations, it's like a vision statement really matters when it hits the hard times. You know what I mean? So that's the test. And so it's like for Habakkuk, it's like when all these things happen, I'm still rooted in that same foundation. That's cool. Yeah,
I just heard an interview with a tree farmer in Georgia, and so you don't. What's a tree farmer in Georgia? I mean, these are pine tree farmers, and they're growing these big tall pines, and the hurricane came through, and like wiped out his crop.
Oh wow.
So all these gigantic tall pines.
Yeah.
They're all down on his land. And so he's saying, if this tall pine, first of all, they all needed 5 more years.
Yeah.
They're 30-year crops. 30 years.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
He's like, they all needed 5 more years.
Oh my gosh.
But if the wood is good, I get $30 a ton or something like that for lumber.
Right.
But if the wood blues, meaning it starts to rot because it fell over in the soil, then I can only sell it for pulp. They'll only be worth $2 or $3 a ton. And he's saying, this is my retirement plan.
Yeah. And
that's a 30-year plan.
Oh my gosh.
That got blown out of the water.
Right.
And we just don't even think of it. I think it struck me because, things go well or go poorly in my pace of life. It's like, having a bad week.
Right.
Having a bad month.
Right.
Like, what if you had to overcome a 30-year,
oh my gosh.
Right. And so that just reminded me of that. But we get a choice as believers, no matter what we're going through. You get a choice to practice gratitude, to give thanks in hard times.
Right.
So, why do you think that's? Do you think that's hard for people, Parker?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I have a challenge with that. If I get a flat tire, it can just ruin my whole day, right? But speaking to your analogy of the 30 years or just this more severe circumstances, one that I wrote down here is this actually really moved me when I read it in preparation for this podcast. So when they pulled out Anne Frank's diary out of the attic, right? That one of the quotes, and it's obviously that. I read that book in high school, and I saw the house in Amsterdam. Obviously, a very convicting story. But so she's got one quote in her diary. Again, she's in the attic. She's hiding from the Nazis. She's been up there for months, years. I mean, and they've got to smuggle food up there, and the food is tight because it's rationing. And she says, "I am grateful to have this time, even though it is in hiding, to grow into the person I am becoming. I am grateful for the people who have made it possible for me to survive."
Gosh.
I mean, how convicting is that? I'm over here with my flat tire,
Right.
and I'm all upset, and it's going to ruin my whole day. But Anne Frank is in the attic, and she's saying, "I'm grateful. I'm grateful." So, yeah, I mean that level of discipline there, that's pretty impressive.
I was just hearing a podcast by John Ortberg where he said that one of the biggest surprises of his life as a pastor and as a Christian leader is that the people who seem to develop the best practice of gratitude are people who are in the most difficult of situations.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Like facing, the worst diagnoses,
Oh my gosh.
the worst health challenges, the worst life challenges, and they seem to develop just the best practices of gratitude because I think too, because as we've said, it's not a seasoning. It's on life. It's not just adding. Right. It's not just putting some flowers. On the kitchen table.
It's a pretty core.
It's a battle.
Yeah. Right.
It's a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
And you're either going to go up or down, in your life according to that battle. So
absolutely.
Maybe we can give people some. Do you have any practices of gratitude in your own life?
Well, as I was researching and preparing for this podcast, I saw all of the things that people do and recommend others to do. Yeah. And I was convicted that I wasn't really doing that.
Right.
And so
me too.
I'm walking away from this with some ideas. I mean, there's on a really practical level, I saw the gratitude journal come up multiple times.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. I mean, one idea is even just writing people letters, thanking them.
Yeah.
Where I mean, obviously, if you give somebody a gift and they give you a thank you note, that's really nice. And my parents always taught me from a young age. And I mean, a handwritten thank you letter really can go a long way. But
I was taught, if you liked what happened, say thank you.
Yeah.
If you want it to happen again, write a thank you note.
Yeah.
Which is that's a good little loose,
for sure,
thing to remember.
Yeah.
It has served me well.
Yeah.
Yeah, write a thank you note. Okay.
One layer on top of that even is I have a few friends who every once in a while they'll do letters like that, but it's not associated with a specific gift. It's not like, oh, thanks for this gift. It's just,
I'm grateful for
I'm just
you.
taking time out of my day to just write you a letter to say how thankful I am for
awesome.
you as a friend.
Yep.
And I thought, I need to do that.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's another one I think of. Yeah. What about you? Any practicals or any ways that folks listening to this, or even me, I mean, on the discipline side, how can we commit ourselves more to a practice of gratitude?
Well, I mean, every time Thanksgiving comes around, I do think about it. Like we have a practice around our table. We had a practice when I was a kid where my mom would put a silver dish out on the table, and everybody had a corn kernel at their place.
Nice.
And so you pass the silver dish around, and you drop your corn kernel in, and you say what you're grateful for.
Yeah. That's cool.
And you're not allowed to say, I'm grateful that we're almost done with this exercise. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it was just a good little
cool.
thing to think about. You know what? As I come to Thanksgiving, that's actually what I think about. I don't think so much about like all the food and stuff.
Yeah.
I really do think about Thanksgiving. Like I think about gratitude and how am I doing with gratitude. And when I was a new Christian, I was taught an acronym of prayer called ACTS, so that when you pray, you move through 4 movements in your daily prayer, and they are adoration, where you start by just saying, God is awesome, God, you are powerful, you're bigger than anything in my life. That's cool. Second, confession, just, Lord, I know there's stuff between us, and I want to ask your forgiveness. And so ACT is thanksgiving. So to have a discipline of before S, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that you give thanks, and you kind of list
Right.
your blessings before the Lord, and you give thanks with gratitude.
Right.
And then you go to S, which is supplication, which means asking for something.
Yeah.
Which a lot of times with prayer we just kind of jump right to that. But I find that going through adoration, confession, thanksgiving,
That's cool.
before I start saying, and so Lord, I really want to see you move here or here or here,
Right.
really helps my heart.
Yeah.
I think I could do more. I was reminded, thinking of this, Parker, of that there's an old hymn, Count Your Blessings.
Oh, nice.
A little nursery, or not nursery rhyme, but just like a little,
Yeah.
count your blessings, count them one by one, something like that.
Nice.
But it's not just when you think about how this is a command of God,
Yeah.
how obedience or disobedience to it will impact yourself, your life, your mental health, your relationships.
Right.
When you think about that God has brought so many gifts into your life, the practice of gratitude, it's not just an added benefit. It's a battle, and it's a life or death,
Right.
light or dark kind of a battle. So I just encourage everybody to find a way to give thanks this week.
Absolutely, yeah. Heading into the Thanksgiving season, I hope you all enjoyed this podcast on gratitude, and hopefully there was a nugget in our talk over the last 25 minutes that maybe there's something you could take away, that maybe even just coming up with this Thanksgiving with family and friends, hopefully there's something that you could potentially apply in your life. And thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for being here. Next week we'll talk about what do you name him? Naming Jesus, as we get together in a couple of weeks. See you soon.